For no other reason than her mother's grave illness. The young woman agreed to a loveless marriage with a man more than 30 years her senior. She thought her life was set, a path of sacrifice laid out before her. But on her wedding night, as the door to the bridal suite swung open, she froze, staring at the woman already sitting on the bed, a face hauntingly familiar. You are invited to listen and enjoy this story now. My name is Vivian Hayes, and I just turned 24. At an age when others dream of romantic love, white wedding gowns, and kisses under the sunset, I was walking down the aisle with a man 32 years my senior. His name was Richard Vance, a successful magnate with salt and pepper hair, sharp, calculating eyes, and a calm, elegant demeanor that made it hard to guess his true age. On our wedding day, many people thought I was his estranged daughter. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. She must have married that old man for his money. As for me, I could only lower my head, my hands clutching my bouquet so tightly they trembled. I did not love Richard. That was the truth. This marriage, for me, was a transaction. My mother was in the final stages of renal failure. Her treatments cost thousands of dollars every week. I didn't have the means to provide for her. My father passed away when I was in high school. My younger brother was in college, working multiple part-time jobs, but barely making enough for his own meals. Then Richard Vance appeared, making an offer. He would cover all of my mother's medical bills, pay my brother's tuition, and settle all our debts. The condition was that I had to marry him. I nodded. I had no other choice. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I sat staring at my mother's picture on my phone, my hands shaking with fear that I was trapping myself in a gilded cage with no escape. But my mother was happy. She didn't know the truth behind it. She thought I was in love with Richard, that I had found a good man. I didn't dare tell her. I just wanted her to live. As long as she lived, I could sacrifice anything. The wedding took place at a 5-star resort in Carmel by the Sea. Everything was glittering and extravagant, like something out of a dream. But to me, it was all just a beautiful facade for a grand play. I sat on the stage, in a pristine white dress, hand in hand with Richard, my heart a hollow void. Richard behaved impeccably, a perfect gentleman. He didn't touch me beyond the formal hand-holding in front of the guests. He never looked at me for too long. His gaze always seemed distant, lost in thought. On our wedding night, I was taken to a private villa within the resort. The suite looked like a spread from an interior design magazine, but I felt suffocated. I took a long shower, put on a silk nightgown his assistant had prepared, and stepped out of the bathroom, my nerves stretched taut. I didn't know what would happen tonight. As a woman, I knew that marital duties were unavoidable, especially in a marriage of convenience like this one. I was afraid, but I had prepared myself. Taking a deep breath, I walked out of the bathroom to find the bedroom door slightly ajar. The lighting inside was soft. The scent of essential oils wafted through the air, but Richard was nowhere to be seen. I approached the bed and stopped dead in my tracks. On the sofa, opposite the bed sat a woman. She was turned partially away from me, her long, dark hair cascading down her back. She wore a deep crimson dress, her legs crossed in a posture of elegant arrogance. I was paralyzed, my heart pounding in my chest. My eyes were glued to her back, my hands clenching the hem of my nightgown. I tried to speak, to ask who she was, but my throat was tight. Just then, the door to the second bathroom opened, and Richard emerged, wearing a robe, his hair still damp. His eyes showed a flicker of surprise when he saw me standing frozen in the middle of the room. Who was that?" I stammered. Richard didn't answer right away. He looked at me for the first time since we'd met. He truly looked at me, and his gaze turned a few degrees colder. "Go inside, Vivian. I need to speak with her for a moment." I was stunned, 100 questions rising in my mind. Who is she? Why is she here on my wedding night? And why isn't he surprised? I didn't go inside. I took a few steps forward to see the woman's face clearly, and when she turned around, I couldn't believe my eyes. The woman was Richard Vance's ex-wife. She was beautiful, but it was a sharp, cold beauty. Red lips, dark eyeliner, skin as pale as porcelain. She looked me up and down, her eyes piercing, her expression a mix of a smile and a sneer. "So, you're the new wife of Richard," she said, her voice slow and haughty. "You look so young." I didn't reply. I turned to Richard, my voice almost a shriek. "What is this? Are you divorced?" Richard calmly adjusted his robe. "We are divorced, but she is still a part of my life." I froze. my heart feeling as if it were being squeezed in a vice. The questions, the anxieties about this purchased marriage, were slowly turning into a horrifying reality. The woman stood up, walked towards me, and placed a hand gently on my shoulder, whispering in my ear, "You're just a commodity. Don't think that wearing a wedding dress makes you the lady of this house. In this home, I am still the woman he loves." I shoved her hand away and stumbled back, tears I hadn't realized were there streaming down my face. A wave of humiliation and shame washed over me. Richard stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "but I'm not ready for another marriage. She still lives here." I let out a laugh, a dry, painful sound. So, I was just a replacement, a new shadow for an old one that had never left. I turned and walked out of the room, my bare feet cold on the stone floor, my heart shattered. I walked the entire long path from the villa to the main lobby of the resort, my mind blank. Each step felt as heavy as stone. I was in a thin silk nightgown, and the coastal night wind whipped through me, chilling me to the bone. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the numbness in my soul. I had just gotten married, or more accurately, I had just sold myself. And what I received on my wedding night was my husband's ex-wife, sitting smugly in my bridal suite, brazenly declaring that I was merely a transaction, and she was the real woman of the house. I don't know how long I sat on a stone bench near the resort's lotus pond. The dim yellow lights cast a pale glow on my face. My head was spinning, my heart constricted. I felt like a puppet on strings, manipulated and deceived. My phone vibrated. It was my mom. "Vivian. Honey? How's your wedding night? I'm so happy for you, sweetie. I pray you'll be happy. Richard is a good man. I believe you'll have a stable life with him." Her voice was weak, but filled with joy. I bit my lip, tears flowing uncontrollably. I couldn't let her know. I couldn't tell her. I just whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. He's very good to me." After hanging up, I buried my head in my knees and cried silently. I returned to the room as dawn was breaking. I had no more strength to go anywhere else. The bedroom was quiet now. No one was there. Richard's ex-wife was gone. He sat alone on the sofa, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes weary. I didn't look at him, just walked silently into the adjoining room and closed the door. I couldn't sleep. All night, I tossed and turned, tears continuing to fall, though I didn't understand why I was still crying for that man. The next morning, I was awakened by a knock on the door. "Miss Hayes?" "I'm Sarah, Mr. Vance's assistant. The mistress would like to see you." I frowned. "The mistress? I mean, Miss Victoria, Mr. Vance's ex-wife." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "What did she want to see me for?" She said, "It's important." I nodded, my face a cold mask. We met at a cafe in the resort. Victoria, Richard's ex-wife, was dressed in an extremely elegant, simple yet luxurious outfit. She still carried herself with the air of a powerful woman. I sat opposite her, my gaze unwavering. Victoria smiled, a look of amusement in her eyes. "I thought you'd have run off by last night, but you stayed. Good. You're not as weak as I thought." I didn't respond, just clasped my hands tighter under the table. Victoria took a sip of her coffee and leaned back in her chair. "You know, Richard and I were once the perfect couple. I was the only one who truly understood him, but we couldn't continue. He has a deep wound that no woman can heal, not even me." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Victoria tilted her head, her eyes sharp. "Do you really think he married you to save you because you were poor? No, he's not that kind of philanthropist. He married you because you look like someone." I was stunned. Like who? Like the woman who nearly destroyed him. The only one he ever loved to the point of madness. But she betrayed him. I gasped, feeling everything slipping out of my control. Victoria continued. "When I found a picture of that girl in his wallet, when I saw he still kept her old handkerchief, I knew I was just a ghost. And now it's your turn. You don't realize it, but you're reenacting a role someone else once played. He chose you out of obsession, an unbreakable emotional addiction. You're no different from me back then." I looked at her, my voice cold. "If you knew all that, why did you come back? Why did you interfere on my wedding night?" She laughed loudly. "Because I wanted to see how much the next one would suffer." I trembled with anger, my lips pressed into a thin line, my heart aching as if pierced by a knife. Victoria stood up, pulled a photograph from her purse, and slid it across the table to me. "This is her. You should know who you're a substitute for." I looked at the photograph and froze. The person in the picture was my cousin, who had gone missing a year ago during a trip with her boyfriend. My family had searched everywhere for her, but there were no leads. This is Clara, I stammered. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Ah, so you know her. My entire world plunged into an abyss. Clara was someone my whole family loved dearly. I used to look up to her as a role model, but she vanished without a trace. And now, I had been married as her replica. I stood up, stumbling, my heart racing. What was I supposed to face now? A husband who didn't love me, an ex-wife meddling in my life, and a horrifying secret behind my own cousin's disappearance. I went back to my room, rummaged through my things, and pulled out an old family photo. It was definitely Clara. Her posture, her eyes, her face. People used to say we were like two peas in a pod. I understood now. They chose me not because I was me, but because I was Clara's shadow. I didn't know what had happened to her, but I knew my life no longer had a way back. And if my cousin was the woman who drove Richard Vance mad with love, then I had to find out why she disappeared. And whether the man in this house, my husband, was hiding a terrifying secret I could never have imagined. From the moment I saw the photo of Clara, my once close cousin, whom my family had been desperately searching for over the past year, my heart felt like it was being squeezed, a chill spreading through my entire body. Victoria's words echoed in my mind. He married you because you look like the woman who once drove him mad. And that woman was none other than Clara. I returned to the villa, my soul on fire. I needed to know the truth. I needed to know what had happened to my cousin. The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. What if Richard was involved in her strange disappearance? I didn't dare confront him directly. At least not yet. I needed to be calm, to make a plan. I couldn't let him lead me around like a puppet anymore. I found my way back to the study in the villa, a room I had briefly glimpsed when I was first brought here before the wedding. At the end of the second-floor hallway was a wooden door with intricate carvings, locked by a fingerprint scanner. I didn't have access, but I remembered that yesterday morning, while Richard was working, he had let me in for a moment before stepping out to take a call. I'd seen him type in a code to open the door. It was his mother's birthday. I guessed this because, during dinner, a housekeeper had once mentioned Mr. Vance always uses his mother's birthday for all his passwords. I took a chance and entered the numbers into the keypad below the scanner. Click. The door opened. I tiptoed inside, my heart pounding. The room was filled with towering bookshelves and a carefully locked filing cabinet. But what caught my eye was a large oil painting hanging prominently on the wall. The subject of the painting was Clara. I stood frozen. There was no doubt anymore. Her gentle eyes, her softly curled hair, her faintly smiling lips, every detail was rendered with lifelike precision. This painting could only have been created by someone deeply in love. The gaze in the portrait was not like that of an ordinary decorative piece. It was an obsession, as if Richard had never stopped thinking about her. My eyes scanned the room, searching for anything else related to her. A small desk drawer was locked, but the wood was old. I used a bobby pin to carefully pry it open, and succeeded. Inside was a stack of faded letters. I pulled one out and read it. It was a handwritten letter in Clara's elegant script. Richard, I've thought about this a lot. I'm sorry. I can't continue this relationship. I'm afraid of myself when I'm with you. Your love suffocates me. I once loved you, but your love goes beyond all limits. It's not love, it's possession. Reading this, my hands trembled. The letter was dated exactly 5 years ago, around the time she went missing. I pulled out another letter. Don't look for me anymore. I'm leaving this city. If you keep searching, I will go to the police. I collapsed onto the floor, my head spinning. So, Clara had tried to leave him, and it seemed she was very scared. Why? What had Richard done? Was he the good man I had thought, or just a sick man hiding behind the mask of a refined businessman? I quickly stuffed the letters into my blouse, relocked the drawer, and left the room. No one saw me. I hid in my room, locked the door, turned on the nightlight, and curled up in a corner of the bed like a child who had just escaped a nightmare. The next morning, while I was still sitting in a daze, Richard pushed the door open and walked in. His face looked tired, but his eyes couldn't hide his concern. Do you have a fever? Why is your face so pale? I shook my head. I'm fine. He sat down beside me, his voice gentle. Vivian, I know you were shocked last night. I didn't expect Victoria to come to the room like that. I'm sorry. What's between her and me is in the past. I looked straight into his eyes for the first time since the wedding. Your past is Clara, isn't it? He froze. What do you know about Clara? My voice was tense. She's my cousin. And I know you once loved her to the point of madness. So much that you still paint her portrait, keep her letters, and married me just because I look like her. Richard shot up, his face pale. You went into my study. Yes. Because I can't live with someone who only sees me as a ghost of someone else. He was furious, his eyes like burning coals. You don't understand anything. You don't know how she left me, betrayed me, disappeared without a word. I went mad trying to understand why. So you married me for what? To take revenge? To torture me in her place? I married you because I needed a chance to start over, he yelled. You were the only one who made me think I could forget Clara. But I'm not her. I'm Vivian. I have my own life, my own feelings. You have no right to piece me together into someone who has already left your life. I stood up, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. If you truly loved her, then tell me, where did Clara go? Why did she disappear? Richard fell silent. A long moment later, he sank into a chair, his voice strained. I don't know. I swear. After she left that last letter, I couldn't contact her anymore. I thought she was dead. But if you're her cousin, maybe you can find what I never dared to face. I stood there, stunned. His words were like an admission that he was hiding a part of the truth. That evening, after he had gone out for a business dinner, I quietly called my younger brother and asked him to send me all of Claire's old photos and messages. I needed to follow every clue, starting from my own family. I would not be a puppet in someone else's life anymore. I had to find Clara, even if it meant risking everything. I left the villa before the sun was fully up, dew clinging to the long stone path leading out of the luxurious compound. With every step, Richard's words from the previous night echoed in my head. I don't know where Clara is. I thought she was dead. But if you're her cousin, maybe you can find what I never dared to face. I didn't know if he was telling the truth or hiding something, but I knew one thing. Clara didn't disappear without a reason. Someone like her, strong and proud, wouldn't stay hidden forever unless there was an extremely serious reason. When I got to my mother's house, I didn't tell her what was happening. I just made an excuse about an urgent work matter and then asked her about Clara. My mother sighed, her eyes distant. Clara was always smart, beautiful, and a good student. Everyone thought she'd marry a good man. But then, after that trip with her boyfriend 5 years ago, she vanished without a trace. Her family didn't say much either. They said they broke up, and they didn't know where she went. The police investigation went nowhere. Who was her boyfriend, Mom? I asked, my heart starting to pound. I'm not sure. I just know he was older, wealthy, some kind of business owner. Clara was very secretive about him, never brought him home. Back then, your mother and I were drowning in debt, and Clara often sent money to help. I nodded, my hand gripping my phone tightly. What my mother said matched my suspicions perfectly. A wealthy, older boyfriend, kept secret, and then Clara's sudden disappearance. Could that person have been Richard? I left the house and immediately called Jessica, Clara's best friend. She had been the closest person to my cousin, even living with her during college. I had met Jessica a few times, and Clara always said, Jessica is my soulmate. The phone rang a few times before Jessica picked up. Vivian? Wow, it's been a long time. What's up? Jessica, I need to see you. It's about Clara. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Jessica's voice dropped. What have you found out? I can't talk over the phone. I'm on my way. Please meet me. We met at a small coffee shop near the Golden Gate Bridge. Jessica had changed a lot from what I remembered. She was thinner, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. I sat down, and before I could say anything, Jessica spoke first. You've met him, haven't you? Richard. She nodded, her eyes welling with tears. Yes, it was him. He was the one who loved Clara, but he was also the reason she disappeared. I clenched my fists, my heart racing. Tell me everything. What happened to her? Jessica pulled a stack of old photos from her bag and handed them to me. They were pictures of Clara and Richard during their happy days. Clara was smiling radiantly, while Richard always stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his eyes fixed on her with adoration. In the beginning, he treated Clara like a queen. Gifts, cars, money, trips all over the world. Clara thought she had found the perfect man. But over time, he became more and more controlling, possessive. He wouldn't let her see her friends, cut off her contact with family, and even installed surveillance cameras in the apartment he rented for her. I was stunned, trembling. And then what? Jessica squeezed my hand. Clara was terrified. She told me, in tears, that if it continued, she would go insane. One day, she planned her escape. She left him a letter, turned off her phone, and vanished. But one night, she called me, crying hysterically, saying he had found her. Clara begged for help, but after that night, I could never reach her again. My throat went dry. So, you didn't call the police? I did. But no one believed me. He was too clean, too powerful. All my accusations fell on deaf ears. I even tried to find Clara at his office, but they threw me out like I was crazy. I looked at the photos again. Every happy moment was now a haunting memory. Jessica looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. Vivian, you have to get out before it's too late. You're living in a house that could be a second tomb. I didn't say anything, just nodded. A storm was brewing inside me. That evening, I returned to the villa. Without a word, I went to my room and locked the door. I knew that if I wanted to find Clara, I had to find the last place she lived after she ran away. I looked through the old photos Jessica had given me, zooming in on one of Clara in front of a small shop called Maria's Fabrics in East Los Angeles. I looked up the address online. The next day, I made an excuse about visiting my mother and took a cab to East L.A., searching for that tailor shop. The owner, a middle-aged woman, recognized Clara immediately when I showed her the photo. Oh, yes, she used to work here. Very skilled and polite. Her name was Clara, right? But she left a long time ago. A few years now. After a man came looking for her. She was terrified, packed up, and left in the middle of the night. Do you know where she went? The owner shook her head. No idea. But that day, she left behind a small wooden box. I've kept it all this time, in case she ever came back. I felt like I had struck gold. The owner went inside and brought out a small, black-painted wooden box. I opened it. Inside was an old silver bracelet and a folded piece of paper. On the paper, written in a hurried, shaky hand, were the words, "If anyone finds this, tell Jessica he knows where I'm hiding. I'm trying to leave the country. Don't trust anyone, especially not a Vance." I clutched the note, my breath catching in my throat. Clara was alive, and she was running from something very dangerous. And the man with the surname Vance was my husband, Richard Vance. I sat silently in the car for the entire ride back from East Los Angeles to the villa. My hand clutched the old wooden box as if it were the last thread connecting me to Clara. The note inside seemed to tremble with every beat of my racing heart. Don't trust anyone, especially not a Vance. The words repeated in my mind like a curse. Richard Vance, the man I called my husband, was one of them. He had loved Clara, been abandoned by her, and gone mad over losing her. And now I, her strangely similar cousin, had been drawn into his orbit as a replacement. I was starting to feel afraid of his composure, of his seemingly caring actions that were excessively controlling, and of how easily he had entered my life with money, power, and what seemed like a lifeline. It was dark when I arrived back at the villa. I intended to hide the box in a drawer under my clothes, but as soon as I opened my bedroom door, Richard was standing there, leaning against the doorframe, his expression a mixture of darkness and scrutiny. "Where have you been all day?" I flinched but quickly regained my composure. "I went to see my mother. Is something wrong?" He didn't answer right away, just slowly walked towards me, his eyes boring into mine. "Who did you meet?" I looked directly at him, trying to keep my voice steady. "No one. Just my mom and my brother." He nodded slightly, a small smile on his lips, but I could see it didn't reach his eyes. "Good," he said, then quietly walked out. I stood frozen for a few seconds before locking the door firmly. I knew he was suspicious of me. Perhaps he had sensed something a change in my attitude, in my eyes, in the way I looked at him. I didn't sleep that night. I sat staring at Clara's note. The shaky handwriting, written in haste, was like a final plea. I'm trying to leave the country. If she was still alive, where was she? Had she already left? Or did something happen that prevented her from ever returning? The next morning, I went to Richard's study. I knocked and entered with a calm expression. "I want to ask you something." He looked up from his files and nodded. "Go ahead. 5 years ago, you were in love with someone named Clara, weren't you?" Richard paused for a beat before slowly putting down his pen. "Yes. I don't deny it. And you knew from the beginning that I was her cousin, right?" He was silent. I stared at him. "So why did you still marry me?" He stood up and walked to the window, his hands in his pockets. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and strange. Because I thought you could help me understand why she left me like that. I clenched my fists, my lips trembling. She left because she was afraid of you. Because you were controlling. Because you suffocated her until she couldn't breathe. You spied on her, were possessive. Forbade her from seeing people. That's not love. Richard turned around, his eyes bloodshot. You don't understand. I loved her with my entire being. And she left me like I was a piece of trash. She promised she would never leave. But she's a human being, not your property. I screamed, tears streaming down my face. You loved her, but you also destroyed her. And now you've married me, her cousin, for what? To start over with a replica? Or to continue your obsession? Richard stood stunned, his gaze softening, his voice quieter. I don't want to hurt you, Vivian, but I can't let go. I backed away step by step, tears falling relentlessly. I am not Clara, and I won't disappear like she did. With that, I ran out of the room, my heart feeling like it would burst from my chest. I decided to meet Jessica again. This time, I brought the box and Clara's note. She was stunned when she saw her best friend's handwriting. Oh my God. She really did try to escape, I asked. Do you know anyone who might have helped her hide? A friend? A coworker? Anyone? Jessica thought for a moment, then shook her head. There was one person, Kevin. He was an old colleague of Clara's. I heard he had a crush on her. They worked at the same company for a short time. After Clara quit, he quit too. Maybe they were in contact. I was overjoyed. Do you remember his full name? Kevin. Kevin Miller. I think his family lives in Pasadena. I immediately searched online and found a matching address. I decided to go see this Kevin Miller the very next morning. The house was tucked away in a quiet alley. I knocked on the door. A thin man in his early 30s opened it, his eyes wary. Who are you looking for? Are you Kevin Miller? You used to work with Clara Hayes. His expression changed, and he tried to close the door, but I stopped him. I'm her cousin. I'm looking for her. Clara mentioned you in her last note before she disappeared. Kevin stared at me. Then, after a long moment, opened the door wider. Come in. I stepped inside. The house was simple, a bit dark. He poured me a glass of water and sat down opposite me. Clara went missing after the last time she called me. That day, she said her hiding spot had been discovered, and she was terrified. I was about to go pick her up, but then I couldn't reach her anymore. I reported it to the police, but no one believed me. They said I was making things up, even threatened me if I kept making a scene. Who threatened you? A strange man. But I believe he was one of Richard Vance's people. I fell silent. Do you know where Clara is now? Do you think she's still alive? Kevin sighed. I'm not sure. But there was one last address she sent me before she lost contact. It was a motel near the border in Kern County. She might have been planning to cross. I clenched my fists. Please, take me there. Kevin looked at me and nodded. If you dare to face it, then get ready. Because that place, it's not easy to turn back from. The drive from San Francisco to Kern County wasn't long, but for me, it was a journey fraught with anxiety and dread. Sitting beside me was Kevin, the only person who held the last piece of information about Clara before she vanished completely from this world. Every time the car jolted on the bumpy road, my heart leaped with a mixture of fear and hope. The motel Kevin mentioned was located on a red dirt road, flanked by a sparse forest and a sprawling green cornfield. The building was old, its tin roof rusted. A few scattered houses dotted the landscape, creating a scene so desolate it was chilling. This is the last place. Clara messaged me from before she went silent. Kevin said, pointing, his eyes reflecting a deep, unnameable sadness. We walked into the yard, where a middle-aged woman was sweeping. Seeing strangers, she looked up, her expression guarded. I approached her politely. Hello, ma'am. Are you the owner of this motel? I am. Who are you looking for? I took out my phone and showed her a picture of Clara. Do you remember this person? She stayed here about 5 years ago. The woman squinted at the photo, then slowly nodded. I remember. That girl stayed in room number 3, all by herself. She was quiet, very sweet, but she went missing. My heart sank. Missing? How did she go missing? The motel owner sighed, leaning on her broom. That night, there was a huge storm, wind and rain. Suddenly, a car pulled in very late. I woke up and looked out, and I saw a tall man go into her room. It was dark, so I couldn't see his face clearly. The next morning, her door was wide open. Things were scattered everywhere, and the girl was gone. No one saw her leave, A cold dread washed over me. I glanced at Kevin. He was also standing there, frozen. Did you report it to the police? Of course. But it went nowhere. They came, asked a few questions, and left. A few days later, a stranger came and cleared out all her belongings. I asked who he was, and he said he was family. Showed me a bunch of papers. I didn't dare argue. Since then, no one has come looking for her. I bit my lip, my heart feeling as if it were breaking. It was clear that someone had deliberately erased all traces of Clara, and that person was very likely Richard. Do you remember the license plate of the car that night? I asked. The owner shook her head. It was too dark. I just remember it was a shiny black car. Couldn't see the plate. But wait. She suddenly frowned and went inside her house, rummaging through an old drawer. A moment later, she came out with a faded, brown woven bracelet. This was hers. I found it behind her room. It must have fallen off. I took it, my hand trembling. This is the bracelet Clara and I made together when we were kids. We called them our twin bracelets. I have one, and she had the other. There's no mistaking it. I collapsed to my knees, tears streaming down my face. She was really here, and someone took her away. Kevin put a hand on my shoulder. Vivian, she might still be alive. But we have to find the man who came here that night. I took a deep breath, wiped my tears, and turned back to the owner. Do you remember anything specific about that man? Besides being tall? Well, yes. He wore a very strong cologne. A spicy, woody scent mixed with tobacco. The kind rich people wear. My heart clenched. Richard always wore a very distinctive, dark woodsy cologne. Whenever he walked by, the scent would linger in the room. This couldn't be a coincidence. On the way back to San Francisco, neither Kevin nor I spoke, but a quiet rage was building inside me. If everything I had just learned was true, then Richard had been deliberately hiding the truth, and he might have been the last person to see Clara before she vanished forever. That night, I returned to the villa in silence. I said nothing to Richard, betrayed no emotion. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I had to confront him, but I couldn't be rash. I needed more evidence, a decisive blow. I began secretly planting a recording device in Richard's study. Through Kevin, who knew some people in the security field, I got a device as small as a fingertip, easily hidden behind a painting. At the same time, I quietly contacted Jessica and the motel owner again. I asked the owner to write a detailed statement about that night, including the specific date, time, and a description of the car and the man who came to the room. 3 days later, Kevin extracted the first audio file from the device and sent it to me. I played it. Richard's deep, steady voice filled the silence. She's so much like Clara, so similar, down to the look in her eyes. But her gaze is different. Not as soft, not as easily led as Clara was. Another voice, probably an assistant, replied, So, are you planning to let her continue living in this house? Not for long. I'm waiting to clarify a few things. If she keeps snooping, if she finds out too much, then I have my ways. I felt my blood run cold. I had been discovered. Richard knew I was investigating Clara, and his words "I have my ways" were nothing short of a threat. I had only one chance. I had to get out of this house, tonight. I slammed the laptop shut after listening to the recording. A cold sweat broke out all over my body, even though the night was cool. Richard's voice echoed in my ears relentlessly. If she finds out too much, then I have my ways. This wasn't just a casual remark. It was a death sentence hanging over my head. I knew exactly what kind of man Richard was. Composed, elegant, kind. All of it was just a mask for a controlling, ruthless man who would do anything to hold on to what he wanted. And I was slowly becoming one of those things. I opened the closet and quietly packed a few sets of clothes, my personal documents, and the wooden box containing Clara's bracelet into a bag. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clearer than ever. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. One sound, one wrong step, and I would never leave this house. I glanced at the clock. 1:25 a.m. The entire villa was submerged in silence. I cautiously opened my bedroom door and stepped into the hallway, my feet moving silently on the thick carpet. With every step, my heart hammered against my ribs. Downstairs, a small light in the corner of the staircase remained on, like a sleepless eye. I descended the stairs one by one, my grip on the bag so tight my hand went numb. Just as I reached the front door, click, the hallway lights flashed on. I jumped and spun around. Richard was standing there, his arms crossed, his face expressionless. "Where are you going at this hour?" His voice wasn't loud, but in the dead of night, it rang out like an alarm bell. I swallowed hard, trying to maintain a calm facade. I'm going to my mother's. She's not feeling well again. I wanted to get there early. He walked towards me, slow and deliberate, like a cat stalking its prey. His eyes darkened. You're wearing a coat, carrying a large bag, and leaving for your mother's in the middle of the night? I didn't answer, my mind racing for an escape route. His hand was already on the doorknob before mine, turning the deadbolt. Click. You know, don't you? He stared at me. You've been in my study. What did you hear? I took a step back. He took a step forward. I trembled. You answer me first. Where is Clara? What did you do to her? He let out a soft laugh, a sound more terrifying than anger. I didn't kill her, if that's what you're thinking. But yes, I kept her. I wouldn't let her leave. I couldn't accept being abandoned. I gasped, my entire body turning to ice. I was holding her until she came to her senses. Then, I would have brought her back. But then she vanished one stormy night. The room was empty, not a trace. His voice grew deeper. His eyes shot with red. I searched everywhere. And then you appeared, looking so much like her, with the same eyes, the same voice. I thought fate was giving me a second chance. By forcing me to live as someone else's shadow, I screamed. Richard clenched his fists, his voice a hiss. You don't know what it feels like to be betrayed. I gave her everything, and she threw me away like a game. And what about me? Don't I deserve to live as myself? Or am I just another replacement part? He looked at me, his eyes dark. It's too late for that, Vivian. He pulled out his phone. I instinctively backed away, and then, without thinking, I kicked him hard in the shin and bolted for the door. Richard's shout echoed behind me. Vivian, stop! I sprinted out the main gate, my fingers flying over the keypad, unlocking it by pure instinct. The security alarm blared, but I didn't stop. I ran onto the street, waving frantically for a taxi like a madwoman. Miraculously, a car parked nearby flashed its lights and pulled up. It was Kevin. Vivian, get in. Quick. I threw myself into the car. Kevin slammed on the gas, the tires screeching as we sped off into the night. I collapsed into the seat, my heart pounding, tears streaming down my face. How did you know I was in trouble? Jessica called me. You weren't answering your phone. I got worried, so I drove over and waited near the villa. I saw the alarm lights and then saw you run out. I gripped his arm tightly. Thank you. If you hadn't come, I don't know what would have happened. Kevin nodded, his eyes filled with concern. You can't go back there. You have to hide for a while. You can't confront a man like him directly without solid proof. I caught my breath and nodded. But I have enough for the police to start an investigation. I just need one final piece. I took out my phone and replayed the recording. Richard's voice filled the car. If she knows too much, then I have my ways. After listening, Kevin gripped the steering wheel. Vivian, we need a witness. Someone who saw him at that motel. If we can find anyone who had contact with Clara after that stormy night, we can turn this whole thing around. I fell silent. Then a memory surfaced. The motel owner had mentioned it. That day, a woman selling fruit at the end of the alley said she saw a man dragging a girl from the motel into a car. I turned to Kevin, my eyes lighting up. I know who we need to find. I returned to the motel in Kern County less than 24 hours after my escape from the villa. This time, I wasn't alone. Kevin was by my side, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings, as if he feared I would vanish into thin air just like Clara had. The country road was deserted. The sun hadn't fully risen, and a light fog still clung to the tin roofs of the small houses. I stood before the motel gate, my hand cold as I clutched the bag containing all the evidence I had gathered. The owner saw me and came out, a look of both relief and worry on her face. Goodness, you're back again. What happened last night that brought you here so early? I nodded, not hiding anything. Ma'am, I need to ask for your help. Do you remember the woman who sold fruit at the end of the road? The one you said saw someone dragging Clara from her room? She frowned, thinking for a moment, then slapped her thigh. Ah, I remember. That's Mrs. Miller. She sells fruit near the small market, drives that old three-wheeled cart that clatters all day. She lives at the end of this lane, about 3 houses down. But what? I asked urgently, my heart tightening. She went to L.A. a few months ago to look after her grandkids. Somewhere in Pasadena, I think. Kevin and I exchanged a look. Without a word, We asked for an address and a contact number for Mrs. Miller. The kind motel owner called an acquaintance to get more information. Half an hour later, she returned with a small piece of paper. Here's her daughter's phone number. Her name is Diane, lives on a street in Pasadena. You can try calling her. I thanked her profusely, my heart pounding as if I was about to uncover the key to the entire mystery. I dialed the number. After a few seconds, a woman's voice answered. Hello? Hi, I'm sorry to bother you. Is this Diane, Mrs. Miller's daughter? She used to sell fruit near the motel in Kern County? Yes, it is. Who's this? My voice trembled. My name is Vivian Hayes. I'm the cousin of Clara Hayes, the woman who used to rent a room there. I have something very important to ask your mother. Is it possible for me to meet her? There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Diane spoke slowly. You're Clara's family? You have no idea how much that story has haunted my mother. She still talks about it. Less than 3 hours later, Kevin and I were standing in front of a small house in a deep alley in Pasadena. Mrs. Miller greeted us with a mixture of surprise and emotion. The moment she saw the picture of Clara that I showed her, her eyes filled with tears. Oh, my heavens, it's her. Such a sweet girl. So tragic. I still remember that stormy night like it was yesterday. We sat down, not daring to interrupt. Mrs. Miller began to recount the story, her voice shaking. That night, I was packing up my cart late. The rain was pouring down. Just as I got to the end of the lane, I saw a shiny black car parked right in front of the motel. A very fancy car. Before I could see the license plate, I saw a man dragging a long-haired girl out of the room. She was struggling, but he was big and strong. He covered her mouth and threw her in the car. I shivered. Kevin squeezed my hand. Ma'am, did you see the man's face? Not clearly, but he was tall, wearing a white dress shirt and slacks. And his cologne, it was so strong, so sharp it made me choke. The car started and just disappeared. The next morning, I heard the girl was missing, but nobody did anything. I pulled out my phone and showed her a picture of Richard. Was this the man? Mrs. Miller looked closely, her eyes widening. Well, he looks a lot like him. I can't be 100% sure, but the build, the hair, the look in his eyes, it's very similar. I took out a pre-printed witness statement from my bag and asked Mrs. Miller to sign it. Though she was trembling, she agreed. She said she had felt guilty about it for years. If she could do anything to help find that girl, she would. I burst into tears. For the first time, I didn't feel alone on this painful journey. That evening, Kevin and I returned to a small rented room in a quiet part of the city where I was temporarily hiding. No one knew where I was. I had changed my phone number, deactivated all my social media accounts, and kept only a burner phone to contact Jessica and Kevin. We sat at a small wooden table and organized all the evidence. Clara's letters, the wooden box, the recording of Richard's voice, Mrs. Miller's statement, the motel owner's testimony. Everything was carefully placed into a file. Tomorrow, we see a lawyer, Kevin said. You need someone who can protect you, Vivian. I nodded. I knew the real battle was about to begin. That night, I dreamt of Clara. She was wearing a simple white dress, her long hair flowing, standing under the old oak tree in our childhood backyard. She looked at me and smiled, her eyes full of love, then turned and walked away. I called out to her, ran after her, but she grew more and more distant until she dissolved into the thin mist. I woke with a start, my pillow wet with tears. But this time, I no longer felt weak. I knew that wherever she was watching over me, and I would not stop until I brought everything to light. I walked into the lawyer's office with Kevin, my hands clutching the file that held all the evidence I had collected over the past month. Each step felt heavy, but my resolve was stronger than ever. This wasn't just a fight for justice for Clara. It was the only way for me to reclaim my own life. We were met by attorney David Grant, a man Kevin knew through a friend in the legal field. Mr. Grant was in his 40s, with a stern demeanor but warm eyes. After I explained the entire situation, he remained silent for a long time before speaking in a low voice. Miss Hayes, I can't guarantee an immediate victory, but with the evidence you've provided, I can at least open the door for a preliminary investigation. This could cause a major stir. The person involved is Richard Vance, and he has many connections. I nodded. I know. But if I stay silent, Clara will be lost in the darkness forever. Mr. Grant gave a slight nod, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. Then I will stand with you. Less than 3 days later, a formal complaint was filed with the district attorney's office, complete with the entire file, witness statements, and the audio recording of Richard's voice. I didn't sign it as his legal wife. I knew that if I used that status, Richard could use our marital rights to countersue. I signed as a family member of the victim, Clara's cousin. From the moment the complaint was filed, my life changed completely. I started receiving calls from unknown numbers, filled with threats and insults. Sometimes, I would step out of my safe house to see a strange car parked down the street. One night, I came home late to find a long gash carved into my door, a silent, menacing warning. Kevin immediately moved me to a more secure location and had Mr. Grant file a request for witness protection. I knew who was behind it all. I knew Richard was furious, but that only strengthened my belief that I was on the right path. 2 weeks later, I was summoned to give a statement to the investigators. I sat across from a team of detectives who listened intently, took notes, and carefully examined every detail. They made no promises, but their serious attitude gave me hope. Mr. Grant was with me, a constant source of support. At the end of the session, a young detective leaned in and whispered, "Miss Hayes, thank you for your courage. There have been attempts from the other side to have this case closed, but your file is strong enough for us to open a formal investigation." I bowed my head in thanks, walking out of the room with tears in my eyes. I had come this far, and I was not alone. That evening, as I sat in my room, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "It's me, Victoria." I was speechless for a few seconds. His ex-wife. Why was she calling me? Her voice came through the line, as cold as a winter night. "I heard you had the nerve to sue Richard." I remained silent. "You're insane, Vivian. You have no idea what he's capable of. I lived in that house. I saw things you haven't seen. And trust me, he is not as simple as you think." I gripped the phone, my voice calm. "Miss Victoria, if you know so much, why didn't you speak up?" Victoria let out a soft, bitter laugh. "Because I'm lucky to still be alive." I froze. "But now that you've dragged him into the light, you should be careful. You might not see tomorrow's sunrise." Click. The line went dead. I sat there, paralyzed, my heart pounding. Victoria's warning was like a cold blade piercing my chest. I started having nightmares. One night, I dreamed I was locked in a windowless room. A man in black gloves stood before me, a smirk on his face. I couldn't see him clearly, but I knew it was Richard. 3 days later, the district attorney's office sent a notice for Richard Vance to appear for questioning. I knew this day would come. But when I saw him walk into the building in the same familiar suit, with the same composed demeanor, his face as calm as if nothing had happened, I couldn't help but shudder. He looked at me from a distance for just a second, and his gaze was that of a cornered animal. "You're very clever, Vivian," he mouthed, a slight smirk on his lips. "But how far do you think you'll get?" I looked straight into his eyes, my voice steady. "Further than the place where Clara was locked up. And I will bring her home, if she's still alive." Richard laughed. It was a laugh I would never forget. The questioning was tense. Richard denied everything, claiming I was delusional, jealous, and fabricating stories to ruin his reputation. His high-profile lawyer used every argument to discredit the recording and witness statements. But I had an ace up my sleeve. The notarized testimonies of Mrs. Miller and the motel owner, complete with clear photographs. Just then, an investigator announced that a new witness had arrived. Mr. Henderson, the former security guard of the motel from 5 years ago. He had happened to read about the case in the news and came forward voluntarily. Everyone was stunned. I turned my head. A man in his 50s, wearing an old security guard uniform and holding a file, walked into the room. He stated firmly in front of everyone, "I was the one who saw this man, Richard Vance, at the motel on the night Miss Hayes went missing. I remember it clearly because I was the one who opened the gate for him." Richard's face went white. I clenched my fists, tears streaming down my face. The door to the truth was finally creaking open. Richard sat motionless after Mr. Henderson, the former security guard, identified him as the man present on the night Clara went missing. Although his lawyer tried to object, arguing that the testimony lacked photographic evidence, Richard's faltering posture and lost gaze made it clear to everyone that his mask was cracking. I looked at him, no longer feeling the fear I once had. Every word I spoke now was firm, each syllable like a nail being hammered in. "I'm not making things up. I'm not fabricating a story. This is all the truth. And I believe that while you can erase tracks, You cannot erase your conscience. The questioning lasted for over 4 hours. When Kevin and I finally walked out of the police precinct, it was late at night. The San Francisco wind blew fiercely through the trees, but I didn't feel cold. I no longer felt the unsteadiness of the early days. I had stood up, and I knew I was getting closer to the truth. You are incredibly strong, Vivian, Kevin said, his voice warm and steady. Just a little more patience, and everything will come to light. I nodded. But before I could say anything, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Hello? On the other end, a woman's voice, soft and trembling, whispered, Vivian, is that you? I froze. That voice was unmistakable. I had heard it hundreds of times as a child, every time Clara lulled me to sleep, every time she hummed a tune on the balcony. I thought I would never hear it again. Clara? I breathed, unable to believe my own ears. Shh, don't speak so loudly. You're being followed. He knows you're investigating. But I'm alive, and I can't hide anymore. I broke down crying, right there in the middle of the city at night. I buried my head in Kevin's shoulder, the phone still pressed tightly to my ear. Where are you? I'll come get you. I'll save you. Clara coughed a few times, her voice choked with emotion. You can't. If you come, we'll both be in danger. But I'll send you the address of someone, a person who helped me escape, who knows everything. Go there and tell them I sent you. They will help you uncover the whole truth. I sobbed. But why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you show yourself? Do you know we've been looking for you for all these years? There was silence on the other end. Then Clara's voice came back, thick with unshed tears. Because I thought I was already dead. Dead in spirit. Dead from the pain and fear. I didn't have the courage. But because of you, I have the strength to step out now. Vivian, I'm so sorry. No, I wept. You have nothing to be sorry for. The one at fault is him. The one who did this to you. But Clara, we're not going to hide anymore. I promise. Be careful, Vivian. And Kevin too. Don't let him find out. Click. The call ended. I stood there, stunned. A moment later, I received a text from the same number. It was just a single line, an address, the last house on 18th Street, in a rural town in San Bernardino County. Find Aunt Sue. Kevin looked at me and nodded. No questions needed. The next morning, we left the city while the sky was still misty. The road to San Bernardino County was long and winding, flanked by fields and rows of trees rustling in the wind. The last house on 18th Street appeared after we turned down a small, overgrown lane that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The door was slightly ajar. I took a deep breath and knocked gently. A woman in her 50s opened the door, her face thin but her eyes sharp. She looked at me for a moment and asked, Are you Vivian? I nodded. The woman, Sue, glanced at Kevin and frowned. And this is? Kevin, Clara's close friend, the one who helped her. Sue nodded and stepped back. Come in. But you don't have much time. The house was simple but clean. On the table was an old wooden box and a thick stack of files. Sue placed her hand on the papers. Clara sent this to me 2 years ago. She knew someone would come looking one day. And here is a copy of a fake passport, her failed attempt to leave the country, and the complete journal of the days she was held in Richard Vance's villa. I opened the file, my hands trembling. The words in the journal were like knives stabbing into my heart. Day 5. He makes me call him my husband. The door is locked. No phone. I begged to be let out. He just smiled and said I needed time to adapt. Day 10. I thought about killing myself. But I can't die. I have to live to find a way to escape. Day 28. I slipped a small note through the crack in the door, hoping someone would find it. But no one came. I started to cry. How long did she live like this? Almost 2 months. Then, one stormy night, I helped her escape. But she was too scared. She didn't dare go home, didn't dare go to the authorities. She asked me to keep all the documents, just in case someone would finally believe her. Yesterday, she called me and said that person had finally appeared. Sue looked at me, her gaze softening. It was you. I threw my arms around her, tears streaming down my face. Kevin stood beside me, his own eyes red. Aunt Sue, what do we do now to bring Clara back? She's still in the country. She's changed her name and moved multiple times. But she's ready to come forward now. As soon as you get a subpoena with witness protection, I will bring her to you. I nodded. I can do it. I promise. 4 days later, I received a call from Mr. Grant. The witness protection order has been approved. We can officially bring Clara in to testify. I stood frozen for a few seconds after hearing the news, my hand gripping the phone, my heart a mix of joy, worry, anticipation, and fear. I was afraid that Clara would shatter when she had to face the man who had imprisoned her for nearly 2 months. But I knew that only she could end this painful journey that had stretched on for years. She was the living witness, the final voice that would tear off Richard Vance's perfect mask. The next morning, Mr. Grant and I went to pick up Clara. She was in a small room in a quiet alley in the city. She was sitting in front of a mirror, tying her long hair with a simple cloth band. When she turned to look at me, her eyes were no longer filled with the panic of our phone call, but were calm and gentle, though deep within them lay an ocean of painful memories. I hugged her tightly, unable to speak. She wore a simple white shirt and pants, no makeup, her face gaunt but resolute. She told me that today, she would no longer be a fugitive. At the police precinct, the atmosphere was as tense as a drawn bowstring. The small conference room was crowded. On Richard's side were 2 lawyers, a personal assistant, and 2 security guards. On my side were Kevin, Mr. Grant, Clara, and an officer assigned to witness protection who had been with us from the start. When Clara walked in, the entire room fell silent for a few seconds. Richard, who had maintained his composure throughout the entire ordeal, suddenly froze. The glass of water in his hand slipped and shattered on the floor. His face turned pale, his eyes filled with panic. Clara didn't look at him. She walked to the witness chair and sat down. Only after a moment did she speak, her voice steady, not weak, but firm. My name is Clara Hayes. I was unlawfully detained by Richard Vance at a villa in Orange County for a period of 57 days. I am here today to tell the whole truth. The room was dead silent, all eyes on her. She recounted every detail, from the early days of being showered with excessive affection by Richard to when he started controlling her, isolating her from her friends. She then told them about the private villa he rented, how he took her there for a getaway and then locked the door from the outside, confiscating her phone and cutting off all contact. Every day, she was given 1 meal, 1 change of clothes. He would only visit at night, sitting and staring at her as if she were a living statue. He told me I was his property, someone who could never leave him. He said if I tried to escape, he would make me truly disappear. I begged, I cried, I screamed, but all I got was silence. He would just look at me and say, "You need time to accept this kind of love." Clara paused and pulled a stack of papers from her file. This is the journal I kept during that time. I hid it in a crack in the wall of the villa's bedroom and later went back to retrieve it. This is my proof. An investigator carefully took the journal. The room was silent again. Richard could no longer contain himself. He shot up from his seat. "You're lying. I never locked anyone up. It's all just words. There's no proof." Mr. Grant smiled and placed another file on the table. "This is the sworn statement of Sue Parker, the woman who helped Miss Hayes escape during the storm. She has signed it and provided a copy of the security footage from the hallway of her old house. We also have the testimony of Mrs. Miller, the witness who saw Richard Vance dragging Miss Hayes into a car at the motel in Kern County." An investigator asked, "Mr. Richard Vance, do you have any comment?" Richard was silent. His lawyer slowly stood up, trying to salvage the situation. "My client suffers from an impulse control disorder following severe emotional trauma, which can lead to delusions. We request a psychological evaluation before proceeding with any charges." Clara let out a laugh, a sound that was both pained and full of scorn. "A psychological disorder? Can a person with a psychological disorder forge official documents to hide me? Can a person with a psychological disorder silently clear out my belongings after I disappear? If he's mentally ill, why has he been hiding it for 5 years?" No one said another word. No one needed to accuse him. The truth had spoken for itself. That evening, Clara and I sat together on the porch. After 5 years, we could finally look at each other as 2 living people, not in dreams, not through photographs, not through shattered memories. "I thought I was dead, Vivian," she said, her eyes red. "But thanks to you, I'm truly alive again." I held her hand. "I've owed you these words for so long. I missed you so much." She smiled, a tear rolling down her cheek. "Me too." 3 days later, Richard Vance was formally charged with 3 felonies: kidnapping, witness intimidation, and forgery. The news exploded across social media, sending shockwaves through the business world. A man once seen as an ideal role model, virtuous, wealthy, turned out to be a monster who had imprisoned his ex-girlfriend because he couldn't handle being left. The country was in an uproar. But for me, none of that mattered as much as one thing. Clara was back. And I was finally living as myself, no longer a shadow, no longer a commodity bought and sold with tears. The trial of Richard Vance was held on a late autumn morning. The sky was clear, the sun gentle. I sat in the front row with Mr. Grant, with Clara beside me. She held my hand tightly, as if to transfer all the courage she had fought for with half her life to get. Before entering the courtroom, she took a deep breath and looked at me, her voice calm. Today, I will stand tall, not out of fear, not out of hatred. I just want to close this chapter. I nodded. Our story wasn't just a court case. It was an indictment of all those who use love to control, possess, and even destroy others in the name of a so-called mad love. When Richard was let in, he was no longer the elegant man he once was. His prison jumpsuit was oversized. His hair was a mess, and his eyes were vacant. He scanned the room, his gaze finally landing on me and Clara. There was no fire, no coldness in his eyes anymore, just an endless void, the look of a man who knew he had lost long ago. The judge read the indictment, which took over 15 minutes. I couldn't hear every word, but two phrases rang clearly in my ears: unlawful imprisonment and kidnapping. Clara was called to the stand first as the living witness. She walked with slow but steady steps. When she stood before the court, she looked directly at Richard and said, "5 years ago, I was a girl blinded by love. I thought the man standing before me today loved me with all his heart. But no, that wasn't love. It was a sick possession. He took my freedom, my dignity, my faith in humanity. I thought I would die in that room, consumed by nameless fear and long nights filled with only the sound of a locking door and the suffocating scent of cologne. But I was luckier than many. I was saved. And I am here today not for revenge, but to finally silence the ghosts in my own heart." I couldn't hold back my tears. The courtroom was silent. Then it was my turn, as a victim who was deceived into a fraudulent marriage, used as a living replica of a woman he could not let go of. I looked at Richard. Each word I spoke was decisive. I once thought I was just a tool to save my mother. But when I learned the truth, I realized the most terrifying thing isn't poverty, but being forced to live someone else's life. To be turned into a shadow, to be loved in a cold, twisted way. Today, I don't need an apology. I just want to stand here to prove that even a woman who feels weak can be strong when she is defending what is right. And I am not afraid anymore. The courtroom erupted in applause. I quietly bowed my head, not out of shame, but out of pride. Finally, it was Richard's turn to give his final statement. He stood up, gaunt and broken. "I have nothing left to defend. I love Clara. That wasn't wrong. But the way I loved was wrong. I don't deny it. I imprisoned her. I lost my mind. I thought that keeping someone by my side was love, but I was the one who turned love into a living hell. I'm sorry, Clara. Vivian, I'm sorry to myself for not knowing when to stop before it was too late." No one reacted. The apology was far too late. At the end of the trial, the court sentenced Richard Vance to 8 years in prison for the convicted crimes, along with a 10-year ban from holding any management position in any organization after his release. The courtroom erupted. But for me, the sentence wasn't an end. It was the beginning of a new life, free from shadows and the ghosts that hid behind an elegant smile. A month after the trial, Clara and I went back to our grandparents' old town, to the small garden and the old house where we grew up, where we had woven those fateful bracelets, where we had laughed under the big oak tree on summer afternoons. Clara decided not to move abroad. She opened a small boutique on a quiet street, where she could live out the passion that had been buried for so many years. As for me, I returned to freelance writing about true stories, about women who had been hurt, who had been oppressed, who had hidden themselves behind the facade of sacrifice. One afternoon, as we were sitting on the porch, I asked her, "If you could go back 5 years, would you choose to love Richard again?" Clara thought for a moment, then said softly, "Yes, but I would love him the right way, and I would know how to leave when it turned into chains. Love isn't about holding on tight. It's about knowing when to let go." I smiled. Her words were a farewell to all the old pain. That day, we buried our old woven bracelets under the oak tree that had witnessed our childhood, a way of closing an old chapter to start a new one. A year later, I published my first collection of short stories, titled The Nameless Ghost, about Clara's story. my story, and the stories of millions of women who have been trapped in silence. At the book signing, Clara sat in the front row, wearing a dress she had made herself. When I signed the first copy for her, she whispered, "You're not anyone's shadow anymore. You've become your own light." I squeezed her hand, laughing through my tears. "And you are living proof that a woman can rise from her pain and turn it into strength." We hugged each other amidst hundreds of flashing lights, and I knew I had finally lived a life worth living. Ladies and gentlemen, the journey of Vivian and Clara has come to an end, but the echo of their story will surely linger in our minds. A young woman who sacrificed her future for her family, a sister whose freedom was stolen by a twisted love. In the end, these two women overcame all fear and stood up to reclaim themselves. Perhaps in life, many of us have silently endured, have forced ourselves to live for others while forgetting that we, too, need to be loved and respected. But today's story shows that no matter how painful the past, if we hold on to belief and courage, we can move forward, stronger and more radiant than ever before. The profound lesson this story leaves us with is that no one is born to be someone else's shadow. Live your truth, love rightly, and dare to say no to what is wrong, even when it comes in the name of love.